Few bands in music history have left a legacy as powerful as the Bee Gees. With their unmistakable harmonies and chart-topping hits, Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb became global icons, redefining pop and disco music. But behind the dazzling success was a story of struggle, brotherhood, and tragedy. From their early days in Manchester to their rise in Australia and their legendary reign in the disco era, the Bee Gees' journey was filled with highs and heartbreaking lows. Today, we uncover the untold story of the Bee Gees, their triumphs, feuds, and the heartbreaking losses that shaped their incredible legacy. The Gibb brothers were born into a world of music even before they had any idea they would become global superstars. Their parents, Barbara and Hugh Gibb, had artistic souls, with Barbara being a talented but little-known singer, and Hugh a drummer who played in various bands. Music was always present in their home, creating an environment where creativity flourished. However, despite their love for music, the family faced significant hardships that would shape the childhoods of Barry, Robin, and Maurice. Originally from the Isle of Man, the Gibb family decided to move to Manchester, England, in search of better opportunities. But post-war Manchester was not the land of prosperity they had hoped for. The city was still recovering from World War II, with bombed-out buildings, food shortages, and a struggling economy. Jobs were scarce, and the working-class neighborhoods were tough places to raise children. Hugh took on various jobs, including playing music in clubs, but steady income was hard to come by. Barbara, as the matriarch of the family, held everything together, raising 5 children while managing the household with resilience. As the Gibb brothers grew up in this challenging environment, they developed strong and distinct personalities. Barry, the eldest, was the natural leader, protective, ambitious, and focused. Maurice was easygoing and good-humored, often playing the role of peacemaker between his brothers. Robin, however, had a mischievous streak that often landed him in trouble. Known for his rebellious nature, Robin developed a dangerous hobby. He loved playing with fire. He would set fire to billboards and other objects, much to the frustration of local authorities. His behavior became so notorious that Manchester police took notice, and eventually an officer visited the Gibb household to suggest that perhaps a fresh start elsewhere might be best for the family. At the same time, the family was struggling financially, barely making ends meet. Faced with these difficulties and Robin's growing trouble with the law, Hugh and Barbara made a bold decision to emigrate to Australia. At the time, the Australian government was encouraging British families to move there under the 10-pound palms scheme, which allowed immigrants to relocate for just £10 per person. Seeing it as an opportunity for a new life, the Gibbs sold most of their belongings and boarded a ship in 1958, bound for Redcliffe, Queensland. The move to Australia marked a turning point in the Gibb brothers' lives. Away from the struggles of Manchester, they began to truly explore their musical abilities. Barry, Robin, and Maurice started singing together, developing the harmonies that would later define their sound. They performed wherever they could, from local talent shows to small gigs at clubs. One of their earliest performances was at the Brisbane Redcliffe Speedway, where they sang between races, unknowingly taking their first steps towards stardom. Their breakthrough came when a local DJ named Bill Gates noticed their talent and gave them a radio spot. It was Gates who coined the name Bee Gees, inspired by Barry Gibb's initials. With their first real exposure to an audience beyond their neighborhood, the brothers realized that music was not just a passion, it was their destiny. Barry Gibb, the eldest of the Gibb brothers, carried the weight of responsibility from an early age. As the family struggled through financial hardships in post-war Manchester, Barry naturally took on the role of protector, watching over his younger siblings as their parents worked tirelessly to provide for them. But beneath his quiet strength, he carried a deep unspoken trauma, one that he would keep hidden for most of his life. Long before the family emigrated to Australia, when Barry was just 4 years old, an incident occurred that would leave a lasting mark on him. A man attempted to abuse him, though Barry was able to escape before anything physically happened. The perpetrator was arrested, but the ordeal was far from over. Despite his young age, Barry was required to give a statement to the police, an experience that forced him to process something no child should ever have to face. Sitting on his bed in the early hours of the morning, answering questions from a policeman, he was thrust into an adult world of fear and confrontation. Barry never spoke about what had happened, burying the memory deep inside himself. In a family where survival meant pushing forward, he had no choice but to keep moving. But the trauma shaped him in ways even he may not have fully understood at the time. It made him more cautious, more protective of his brothers, and more determined to succeed. Where Robin was rebellious and Maurice was carefree, Barry became the steady foundation of the family. Music became his escape, his way of transforming pain into something beautiful. As the Gibb brothers grew closer through their harmonies, Barry found solace in songwriting. Through lyrics and melodies, he expressed emotions he could not put into words. Even in the band's earliest years, his ability to write deeply personal and hauntingly emotional songs set him apart. For decades, Barry never spoke of what had happened. It wasn't until 2017, in an interview with Variety, that he finally shared the story. Even then, his hesitation was evident. "I've never said this before," he admitted before questioning out loud whether he should even be talking about it. He revealed that while he had been spared the worst, others had not been so lucky. The man responsible had harmed other children, and that knowledge haunted him. The rise of the Bee Gees was not just a musical journey, but also a story of brotherhood, ambition, and internal struggles. From the moment Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb discovered their natural ability to harmonize, they shared a dream of success. However, as that dream became a reality, the dynamics between them shifted. What started as a close-knit collaboration gradually turned into a clash of egos, leading to breakups, rivalries, and highly publicized disputes. In the late 1960s, the Bee Gees had already established themselves as a major act in both the UK and the US, with a string of hits that showcased their talent for songwriting and vocal harmony. Their success was built on a balance of creative contributions from all three brothers, but that balance was fragile. Robin Gibb, known for his emotionally charged vibrato, believed he was the true lead singer. His unique voice had been at the forefront of some of their most successful songs, including Massachusetts and I Started a Joke. However, as the band's sound evolved, Barry Gibb's smooth, radio-friendly voice became the focal point. Their manager, Robert Stigwood, and the record label saw Barry's vocal style as more commercially viable, positioning him as the frontman. Robin resented this shift. He felt increasingly sidelined and believed that his contributions were being undervalued. The growing tensions reached a breaking point in 1969 when Robin decided to leave the band to pursue a solo career. His departure marked the first major fracture in the Bee Gees' unity. And it wasn't just a professional split, it was deeply personal. For years, the Gibb brothers had shared everything, relying on each other through financial struggles and the challenges of breaking into the industry. Now that bond was shattered. Barry and Robin stopped speaking to each other, and their relationship was replaced by competition and bitterness. The music press seized on the drama, portraying it as a rivalry between two stars fighting for dominance. Fans took sides, dividing themselves into Team Barry and Team Robin. The narrative was simple. Barry was the commercial powerhouse, while Robin was the artistic purist. But in reality, the split harmed both of them. Barry and Maurice continued as a duo, but their music struggled to find the same magic. Meanwhile, Robin's solo career, despite his initial confidence, failed to reach the heights he had envisioned. His debut album did not achieve the success of the Bee Gees' previous work, and over time, it became clear that the magic of their sound only existed when all three of them performed together. By 1970, Robin realized that he needed his brothers as much as they needed him. The reconciliation was inevitable, and when they reunited, the Bee Gees reclaimed their status as a formidable musical force. This decision would prove crucial, as it paved the way for their reinvention in the mid-1970s as disco icons. Had they remained separated, they may have faded into obscurity. Instead, they adapted to the changing music landscape and became even bigger stars than before. Despite their success, the conflicts between them never fully disappeared. While they were able to work together professionally, personal rivalries lingered beneath the surface. The pressures of fame, creative differences, and the demands of the industry kept them in a constant cycle of tension and resolution. One of the most infamous moments that exposed their ongoing friction occurred in 1997 on the British talk show Clive Anderson All Talk. The interview was intended to be a celebration of their legacy, but it quickly turned into an uncomfortable exchange. Anderson, known for his sarcastic humor, repeatedly mocked the Bee Gees, joking about their falsetto voices and dismissing their early career. His relentless teasing pushed Robin and Maurice to their limit. In a rare moment of public frustration, they stood up and walked off the set, leaving Barry behind. Instead of diffusing the situation, Barry followed suit, delivering the now iconic line, "Well, you're the tosser, pal," before walking off himself. This incident was more than just an awkward television moment. It was a reflection of the deep-seated tensions that had always existed between them. The Bee Gees had always been a unit, but they were also individuals with strong personalities, ambitions, and egos. Barry, as the eldest, naturally assumed the role of leader, but that leadership often made him a source of frustration for Robin and Maurice, who sometimes felt overshadowed. Despite everything, the Bee Gees endured. Their conflicts never destroyed them completely, and their music remained timeless. Through changing musical trends, industry backlash, and personal tragedies, they proved time and again that their bond as brothers was stronger than any disagreement. Their ability to create harmony extended beyond their music. It was also what kept them together. The Bee Gees' journey was marked by immense success, but behind the glamorous facade, the Gibb brothers battled demons that fame and fortune could not silence. While their music defined generations, their personal lives were often filled with turmoil, addiction, and heartbreak. The same intensity and passion that fueled their careers also led to struggles with substance abuse, failed relationships, and ultimately devastating losses. Their internal conflicts, which had shaped much of their early career, did not disappear even after their triumphant reinvention in the disco era. In fact, the pressures of fame only magnified their personal struggles. Each brother dealt with their demons differently, but for all of them, addiction and mental health struggles were a recurring battle. Maurice Gibb, often seen as the most lighthearted and easygoing of the trio, struggled the most with alcoholism. Unlike Barry and Robin, who had frequent disputes and strong personalities, Maurice was the mediator, the one who tried to hold the group together. But behind his charming and humorous exterior, he carried deep insecurities. As the Bee Gees rose to fame, Maurice became increasingly dependent on alcohol, using it as an escape from the pressures of the music industry and the tensions within the group. His drinking problem became so severe that it affected both his personal and professional life. On stage, he was known to sometimes be unreliable, and in the studio, his contributions were often overshadowed by Barry and Robin's dominant roles. His alcoholism also took a toll on his marriage to pop star Lulu, a highly publicized relationship that ultimately fell apart due to his drinking. Maurice's addiction led to emotional breakdowns, and at times, he was unable to function without alcohol. Even after numerous attempts at rehabilitation, he continued to struggle. Robin Gibb, on the other hand, battled a different kind of addiction, one driven by his relentless work ethic and perfectionism. He became hooked on amphetamines, a stimulant that allowed him to stay up late and push himself beyond his natural limits. The music industry was demanding, and Robin, always striving to prove himself, turned to drugs to keep up. However, the consequences were devastating. His addiction not only affected his health, but also caused severe damage to his personal life. His marriage fell apart, and his dependence on amphetamines contributed to erratic behavior that led to a bitter custody battle. In a painful turn of events, Robin was banned from seeing his children, a punishment that haunted him for the rest of his life. While Maurice and Robin's struggles were significant, perhaps the most tragic story of all belonged to their youngest brother, Andy Gibb. Unlike his older brothers, Andy was never an official member of the Bee Gees, but his talent was undeniable. With Barry mentoring him, Andy launched a solo career in the late 1970s and quickly became a teen idol. Hits like I Just Want to Be Your Everything and Shadow. Dancing propelled him to stardom, and for a moment, it seemed that he was destined to follow in the footsteps of his brothers. However, fame came at a price. Andy struggled with the pressures of success and turned to cocaine and alcohol as a way to cope. His substance abuse spiraled out of control, leading to erratic behavior and professional failures. He was repeatedly fired from high-profile gigs, including Broadway productions, because he was too unreliable to show up for performances. His relationship with actress Victoria Principal ended due to his addiction, sending him further into despair. By the mid-1980s, Andy was no longer the rising star the industry had once celebrated. His career had stalled, his finances were in ruins, and his body had been weakened by years of drug abuse. In an effort to turn his life around, he entered rehab and tried to rebuild his career, but it was too late. On March 10, 1988, just days after his 30th birthday, Andy was hospitalized with chest pains and died soon after. The cause was myocarditis, a heart condition worsened by his prolonged substance abuse. His death devastated the Gibb family, particularly Barry, who had always felt responsible for him. The loss of Andy was a wound that never truly healed. Maurice, Robin, and Barry continued their careers, but the pain of losing their youngest brother was something they carried for the rest of their lives. Tragically, more losses would follow. In 2003, Maurice died unexpectedly from complications related to a blocked intestine. Though his death was not directly linked to his past struggles with alcohol, years of substance abuse had weakened his body. The loss was sudden and deeply painful for Barry and Robin, leaving them as the last two surviving brothers. Robin, too, would eventually face his own battle with mortality. In 2010, he was diagnosed with liver and colon cancer, a fight that he endured with characteristic determination. Even as his body weakened, he continued working on music, refusing to let illness define his final years. But by 2012, the disease had taken its toll. After slipping into a coma following complications from pneumonia, he passed away on May 20th, 2012. With Robin's death, Barry Gibb became the sole surviving member of the Bee Gees. The man who had spent his life surrounded by his brothers, Creating music and sharing their triumphs and struggles was now alone. The weight of their legacy and the tragedies that had shaped it rested entirely on his shoulders. Andy Gibb's story is one of brilliance and heartbreak, a young man blessed with immense talent, yet burdened by the pressures of fame and personal demons he could never quite escape. Unlike his older brothers, Andy was never a part of the Bee Gees, but he was deeply connected to them. His voice carried the same signature warmth, and his music was undeniably influenced by Barry, Robin, and Maurice. However, rather than following their path as a group member, Andy embarked on his own solo career, one that burned brightly but faded all too soon. Born in 1958, Andy grew up watching his brothers chase their musical dreams. By the time the Bee Gees had achieved international success, Andy was still a child, but he was already drawn to the world of music. He idolized his older brothers, particularly Barry, who became a mentor and guiding force in his career. With their encouragement, Andy began pursuing his own path in the industry. Unlike many artists who struggled for years before achieving recognition, Andy's rise to fame was meteoric. His debut album, Flowing Rivers, released in 1977, was a massive hit, featuring two number-one singles, I Just Want to Be Your Everything and Love Is Thicker Than Water. He was only 19 years old, and suddenly he was a global sensation. Andy's success continued with his follow-up album Shadow Dancing in 1978. The title track, written with the help of his brothers, became his biggest hit and topped the Billboard charts for 7 consecutive weeks. With his youthful charm, golden voice, and undeniable charisma, Andy became a teen idol, adored by fans worldwide. He had everything: chart-topping hits, sold-out performances, and a seemingly limitless future in the industry. But behind the scenes, his world was already beginning to unravel. Fame came with immense pressure, and Andy struggled to cope. Unlike his older brothers, who had years to gradually adjust to success, Andy was thrown into the spotlight almost overnight. He lacked the experience and resilience that Barry, Robin, and Maurice had built over years of ups and downs. As a result, he became increasingly dependent on drugs and alcohol to deal with the stress. Cocaine, in particular, became his crutch, giving him the energy to maintain his grueling schedule, but also pushing him into a dangerous cycle of addiction. As his substance abuse worsened, his career began to suffer. By the early 1980s, Andy's once promising trajectory had taken a sharp decline. His erratic behavior, missed performances, and increasing unreliability led to him being fired from major projects, including a high-profile role on Broadway in Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. His professional struggles were compounded by personal heartbreak. His highly publicized relationship with actress Victoria Principal ended due to his drug addiction, sending him into further despair. By the mid-1980s, Andy was a shadow of the star he had once been. His financial troubles mounted, and he was eventually declared bankrupt. His attempts to revive his career were met with limited success, as the industry had largely moved on. Realizing that his addiction had cost him everything, Andy finally sought help, entering rehab and trying to rebuild his life. He seemed to be making progress, and there was hope that he might finally turn things around. Tragically, it was too late. On March 10, 1988, just days after his 30th birthday, Andy was hospitalized with chest pains. He passed away soon after. The official cause of death was myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart, but doctors noted that years of drug abuse had severely weakened his body. His passing devastated the Gibb family, particularly Barry, who had always felt a deep responsibility for his younger brother. Barry later admitted that he lived with immense guilt, believing that he could have done more to save Andy. Barry Gibb had always been the leader of the Bee Gees, the steady force that held his brothers together through the highs and lows of their career. But as time passed, that role took on a more painful meaning. One by one, Barry was forced to say goodbye to his brothers, each loss cutting deeper than the last. From Andy's untimely death in 1988 to Maurice's sudden passing in 2003 and Robin's battle with cancer in 2012, Barry found himself carrying the weight of their legacy alone. As the last surviving Gibb brother, he not only had to cope with his own grief, but also with the responsibility of ensuring that the Bee Gees' music and the memories of his brothers would never be forgotten. Andy's death was the first major blow. Though Andy had never been an official member of the Bee Gees, he had always been Barry's protege. Barry had guided him through his early career, writing songs for him, mentoring him, and watching with pride as he rose to stardom. But when Andy's struggles with addiction took over his life, Barry felt powerless to save him. Even after Andy entered rehab and tried to rebuild his career, the damage had already been done. His body, weakened by years of drug abuse, gave out at just 30 years old. Barry later admitted that he carried immense guilt over Andy's death, often wondering if he could have done more to help him. Losing Andy was devastating, but nothing could have prepared Barry for the shock of Maurice's passing in 2003. Unlike Andy, whose struggles had been well documented, Maurice's death was sudden and unexpected. He had gone into the hospital for what seemed to be a routine surgery for a blocked intestine, but complications arose and he suffered a fatal heart attack. Maurice had always been the glue that held the Bee Gees together, the easygoing, humorous brother who kept the peace between Barry and Robin during their frequent disagreements. His death left a hole in Barry's heart, and for the first time he seriously considered walking away from music altogether. The idea of performing without Maurice seemed unbearable. Then in 2012, tragedy struck once again. Robin, who had battled cancer for 2 years, passed away after slipping into a coma following complications from pneumonia. His death marked the end of an era. The Bee Gees were no more. Barry had gone from being part of an inseparable trio to standing alone, carrying the weight of their shared history. Survivor's guilt consumed him. "I sometimes wonder if I should have gone first," he admitted in later interviews. "I'd rather have them back here." For a while, Barry retreated from the public eye, struggling with the idea of performing again. Music had always been something he shared with his brothers. Without them, it felt empty. But over time, he realized that walking away would mean letting their legacy fade. He began to see performing not just as a career, but as a way to keep Maurice, Robin, and Andy alive. Gradually, Barry returned to the stage, finding solace in the music they had created together. He started performing Bee Gees classics again, not just for the fans, but as a tribute to his brothers. In 2016, he made a powerful return to the spotlight when he performed at Glastonbury with Coldplay, standing on one of the world's biggest stages and reminding the world of the timeless magic of the Bee Gees. That same year, he released In the Now, his first solo album in 3 decades. Unlike his previous solo work, this album was deeply personal, filled with songs that reflected on love, loss, and the passage of time. Barry also found new ways to reinvent the Bee Gees' catalog, collaborating with country artists to reimagine some of their most iconic songs. His 2020 album, Greenfields, the Gibb Brothers' Songbook Volume 1, featured duets with artists like Dolly Parton, Keith Urban, and Sheryl Crow, introducing their music to a new generation while honoring the legacy of his brothers. Despite the pain of outliving his siblings, Barry Gibb has continued to share their story, ensuring that the Bee Gees' music remains alive. He often speaks about them in interviews, recalling the laughter, the arguments, and the moments that defined their lives. Though the stage is lonelier without them, every note he sings is a tribute, a way of keeping their voices alive. The Bee Gees' legacy is one of extraordinary triumph and heartbreaking loss. But above all, it is a testament to the enduring power of music. Barry Gibb, the last surviving member, has carried that legacy forward, ensuring that the music he and his brothers created continues to resonate across generations. But long before Barry found himself as the sole custodian of their history, the Bee Gees had already left an indelible mark on the music industry. Their rise to stardom in the late 1960s established them as one of the most successful pop acts of the time, but it was their reinvention in the 1970s that truly cemented their place in music history. The disco revolution transformed them from a popular vocal group into global icons, with hits like Stayin' Alive, How Deep Is Your Love, and Night Fever. The Bee Gees became the defining sound of the disco era. Their music dominated the charts, and the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of all time, turning disco into a worldwide phenomenon. The Bee Gees' music continues to be celebrated, sampled, and covered by artists across genres. Their influence can be heard in everything from pop to R&B, and their songs remain anthems of love, loss, and resilience. Barry Gibb, now in his late 70s, carries their story forward, ensuring that the world never forgets the harmonies that defined an era. Though he may stand alone, his music keeps Maurice, Robin, and Andy alive, proving that legends never truly fade.